Fluorescent light hangs over the simulation command center at Ridgeway AFB, while the server hum sets a steady beat. It is 2:30 p.m. and the floor is calm. Headsets checked. Dashboards ready. A woman in a sage green flight suit badges through a side entrance. Sterile Velcro panels covering name and rank. Limited access approved for a no-notice evaluation. She takes a quiet position near the central data core and watches the flow. Captain Ryan Mercer moves too fast and challenges her presence. Shoulders tight and voice clipped. He closes the gap, catches her sleeve, and pulls her one step off the console rail. Master Sergeant Luis Ortega delivers a calm hands-off. Reminder about two-person integrity. And the motion stops inside UCMJ lines as eyes lift from screens across the deck. The woman stays centered, and a faint alarm chirp rises from somewhere in the network, like a small warning that the weather is changing. Mercer resets his stance but does not push again. Ortega watches the floor and keeps discipline tight. Consoles glow. Fans breathe. And the room holds its breath. Stillness feels heavier than noise. And something under the glass begins to turn slowly. Ridgeway AFB hums with controlled access at the simulation command center as security forces hold the perimeter and badge readers blink green in steady rhythm. It is 2:30 p.m. and a mixed team of junior officers and enlisted airmen move with practiced calm. Running .com checks, confirming headsets, and clearing screens. The woman with the Sage flight suit has limited access authorization for a no-notice evaluation, and her badge hit logged clean at the side entrance. This is a classified floor under CUI to secret handling, with monitors tagged, ports sealed, and procedures posted where every eye can see them. Segmented networks mirror an MQ-9 Reaper feed and a 5th-generation fighter interface, each on its own segment, while the Enterprise Simulation Controller sits on a separate VLAN to synchronize red and blue force overlays. Operators rehearse clean reroutes inside their lanes. Review ROE notes, and keep chatter disciplined while the server tone stays low and even. The feel is routine and tight, like a checklist everyone knows by heart, with chiefs and lieutenants gliding through small corrections. On a distant panel, a tiny graphic hesitates for a breath, then settles. The kind of blink no one notices until it matters. It is 2:40 p.m. when Captain Ryan Mercer steps in close and asks for identification while she studies the central data core. His pace is sharp and his jaw is set. But the room stays quiet. He grips her sleeve and pulls her a single step off the console rail. Master Sergeant Luis Ortega answers with a steady hands-off and a reminder about two-person integrity, and the movement stops inside UCMJ lines as eyes lift from screens around the floor. A technical sergeant notes how her weight settles over the arches of her feet and how her shoulders stay level. The small tells of close-quarters training. Junior officers and enlisted airmen trade uneasy looks without adding to the noise. Mercer reads her silence as refusal and sets his stance as if volume could make certainty. On a peripheral display, a thin tremor skates across a graphic. Just a flicker that seems to vanish. And the room holds its breath as if the air itself knows a test is coming. 2:45 p.m. lands like a switch inside the simulation command center at Ridgeway AFB. Junior officers and enlisted airmen tighten headsets, while red and blue force overlays bloom across glass. The Enterprise Simulation Controller begins to synchronize an MQ-9 Reaper feed and a 5th-generation fighter interface on segmented networks that normally never touch except through that single brain. A faint flicker crawls along the edge of the primary map. Code, artifacts, smear. The room lights shift to amber. Then they wash to red as a flat voice announces that Protocol Sentinel has engaged in fail-secure isolation of the controller. Captain Ryan Mercer orders reroutes and calls for a manual reboot while operators reach for backups. But role-based access control denies each command during lockdown. Cursor trails freeze, message queues stack, and multiple feeds stall at once because the controller is the bottleneck by design. Master Sergeant Luis Ortega walks the aisle with steady eyes, keeping floor discipline even as heat climbs and voices pitch higher. For a breath, the space feels leaderless. not by rank, but by capability. And everyone senses that the next move will not come from the center console. It is 2:48 p.m. when the room scrambles under lockdown, and the architecture shows its design. The MQ-9 Reaper feed lives on one VLAN, and the 5th-generation fighter interface lives on another. Yet both hang because the Enterprise simulation controller is the single point that synchronizes red and blue force overlays. Operators run clean reroutes inside their segments and watch role-based access control deny each path as command latency climbs and audit logs pile up. The hum feels tighter, and the air runs warm while every screen waits on the same bottleneck. A cadet-level officer candidate wonders if this is still part of the scenario and then swallows the thought. Master Sergeant Luis Ortega paces the aisle with quiet eyes and keeps floor discipline steady as hands hover above dead controls. He notices a dark auxiliary maintenance station on the far left that rides an air-gapped maintenance bus and does not touch the live training network. The queue is small and legal, and it sits like a door left ajar, the only path that might let the controller settle back into a stable rhythm. It is 2:50 p.m. when she moves with calm purpose toward the dusty auxiliary maintenance station on the far left. The unit is powered down and tied to an air-gapped maintenance bus that sits outside the live training network. She kneels, wakes the console, and unrolls a government-furnished hardened tablet from her pouch with gloved, steady hands, carefully removed from a sealed sleeve like a tool she has owned for years. A whitelisted maintenance cable clicks into the shielded port as she authenticates with her CAC and a physical token, and the internal diagnostic shell opens without protest. She verifies Sentinel module hashes against the baseline, reseeds controller keys, and rebuilds the routing table with small, exact inputs. Anomalous processes are quarantined into a fenced space as audit logs scroll and role-based access control records each action with time and user. Nothing looks flashy and nothing breaks policy, because the system accepts every step as authorized maintenance rather than a workaround. The indicators along the frame begin to shift from red toward amber, and the room exhales in a hush that says order is finding its way back slowly. Like airflow returning after turbulence at altitude. It is 2:52 p.m. when her hands settle into the diagnostic shell and her flight training takes over. In her head, the flow is like a cockpit check. Battery, then alternator, then avionics, then mags. A simple rhythm that keeps the mind clear. She resequences mission data files the way a crew would stage a DTS load on a ready jet. Patient and clean. Captain Ryan Mercer pushes noise from the center aisle. But she stays on the maintenance bus with authorized emergency admin access and lets the system answer to steady inputs. Status graphics draw a thin, white line across the primary display. Then the line closes into a clean circle that holds. She verifies checksums, confirms key stores, and restarts dependent services in the right order, while role-based access control logs each step with time and user. The alarm tone drops a notch, and latency falls off as consoles regain smooth response across both segments. Blue status lights steady in the corners. The floor exhales, and the quiet takes the room like clear air after weather. It is 2:54 p.m. when the alarms taper and the room slides from red to amber to a steady blue that feels like a held breath finally released. The Enterprise simulation controller returns to a healthy state, and dashboards across the floor light in sync as if waking together. Latency falls. 2. Error queues clear. And the logs show a clean close on an authorized maintenance session that followed every rule. She unplugs the whitelisted cable, coils it neatly, and secures the government-furnished hardened tablet without a flourish. She walks back to the same spot where Captain Ryan Mercer first caught her sleeve and stands still while operators run checks. Hands move across controls and overlays, hold stable for the MQ-9 Reaper feed and the 5th-generation fighter interface with smooth tracks and clean updates. Role-based access control entries line up with time and user. And the controller heartbeat looks even for the first time all day. No one claps because the air does not need it. People test once more, nod to themselves, and let the quiet settle over the deck like the first clear air after weather. The system is not only running again, but running better. And attention gathers around the woman without a word. 2:56 p.m. settles over the deck when the side doors open, and two security forces airmen step in ahead of Colonel Daniel Whitaker in Air Force service dress. He moves with measured cadence through the center aisle. Chin level. Eyes fixed on the woman who stands near the consoles. The room quiets to the sound of fans and distant cooling units, as if the place understands what is about to happen. The colonel stops at a respectful distance and raises a precise salute that belongs to a superior officer. He holds the salute until it is properly returned, then addresses her by rank and name with a clean apology that ends in "ma'am." The words are simple and exact. Nothing added, nothing taken away. Junior officers and enlisted airmen straighten at their stations without being told. Captain Ryan Mercer understands the shift in an instant and lets his hands rest at his sides while floor discipline holds. The air changes from curiosity to respect and stays there. The general gives a small nod that closes the moment as neatly as it began. She turns back to the restored systems and studies the health of the controller while operators keep checks moving. No one speaks because the protocol has already said everything, and the lesson sits in the silence. It is 2:57 p.m. when Lieutenant Colonel Karen Brooks brings the central display to life and a profile fills the glass. The photo is plain and the text is direct. The woman is Brigadier General Evelyn Hart with a Ph.D. in Advanced Systems Engineering from MIT and postdoctoral work in Quantum Systems Integration at Caltech. The room leans in without moving, as if the floor itself wants the facts arranged in the right order. Her record shows time as a tactical systems lead supporting A-10 Thunderbolt II operations out of Kandahar, where understanding failure paths mattered as much as flight lines and schedules. She is now Deputy Director for Project Sentinel inside United States Air Force Cyber Command. The framework running this simulation floor carries her architecture. What just happened at Ridgeway AFB followed policy. Access control. And authorized maintenance on the controller with every action captured by logs. People do not whisper or shuffle. Respect looks like focus that does not blink. Many know how to operate a system when it is green and quiet. Fewer can read it when it breaks and decide what matters first. That difference is readiness in the real world. The display holds steady. The lesson lands. And a clean calm settles over the room. It is 3:10 p.m. when Captain Ryan Mercer is quietly relieved of duty, pending investigation under command authority and UCMJ. Security forces handle routine documentation with calm voices and steady hands. There is no public reprimand on the floor. Consoles stay live, and the mission area returns to normal tempo under watchful leadership. Brigadier General Evelyn Hart remains on base through the week. She walks maintenance bays and network trenches, and the simulator pits with the same measured pace. She sits beside junior coders and operators and asks how they map logic paths and where they look first when a system fails. She listens longer than she speaks and leaves each station with a small note that makes the next check cleaner. Daily habits begin to change in ways that are easy to miss at first. Morning briefings feel softer in tone yet stay crisp in content. People pause before cutting each other off, and they close loops with clearer handoffs and cleaner logs. Respect grows through presence and quiet standards rather than raised voices. Discipline follows the proper channels, and no one needs a speech to understand why. The room learns that consequence is a process and not a show. Calm competence becomes the baseline. Culture shifts because the example stayed steady when it mattered most. The unit chooses a compliant tribute instead of scratching a wall. And Facilities approves a small brushed steel plaque for the southeast corner of the command deck, at eye level with a proper work order on file. The plate is simple and clean, and it carries 6 words that everyone now knows by heart. Never mistake silence for incompetence. It sits where the morning flow passes. A fixed point in a room built for motion. Before 7:30 a.m., small groups of cadets and airmen file in and drift by the corner without crowding. Some touch the metal with a light tap. More habit than superstition. Then move on to headsets and checklists and consoles. The act is quiet and lawful and leaves no trace but a steadier breath. It feels like a small safety wire run through a larger frame. Briefings stay crisp, yet carry a touch more patience. and voices settle a step lower without losing clarity. People wait a beat longer. Finish thoughts. And close loops with cleaner notes and better logs. Nothing about the day is slower, only calmer. The room settles into work with the plaque and frame, and the message folded into the rhythm of the floor. Absorbed without speeches or ceremony, Staff Sergeant Damon Price receives a secure training package over SIP-net using approved Air Force services with end-to-end encryption, multi-factor verification, and proper custody controls. The transfer posts to audit logs in real time, and the classification banner displays as expected. Change control entries, update the record and access control lists, register the authorized pull. Nothing about the moment is dramatic, only exact. He opens the manifest and sees a sanitized root layer framework for Project Sentinel built for instruction, not operational source code. The package includes exercises for fault isolation and recovery steps that mirror the controller incident without exposing sensitive details. At the end sits a short line that reads, "You see it clearly. Keep learning." It lands like a quiet nod rather than a performance. Price closes the session and signs the receipt with a calm click while the log reflects time, user, and purpose. He tags the files for local training use and notes the handling rules, so nothing slips outside policy. The lesson is clear that the gift is not about rank, but about trust in his eye for systems. He breathes once and gets back to work, carrying a quiet push to keep studying. At the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, an anonymous case study enters the ethics and leadership syllabus under the label Ridgeway Event with no personal names attached. The packet outlines a short scenario that mirrors a controller lockout on a simulation floor, the segmented networks, and a lockdown that prevents routine overrides. Cadets read how a lawful maintenance pathway stabilized the enterprise controller, while the room learned a different lesson about perception. The setting is professional, the tone instructional, and the facts are presented without drama. In seminar groups, cadets first point to a technical breach or a failure of chain of command as the critical fault. Instructors guide the discussion toward bias and assumption, asking why silence, sterile, Velcro panels, and an apparent lack of visible rank led to misreads. The room compares what people assumed with what the system required, then maps how correct procedure coexisted with flawed perception. Notes emphasize that readiness depends on both technical mastery and accurate human judgment. Credit is given to those who identify perception as the core issue, not as an opinion, but as an operational risk factor tied to trust and culture. The takeaways link to future officership, where quiet competence must be recognized quickly and treated as signal, not noise. Cadets leave the seminar more alert to how they see and how they decide. The line from the plaque walks with them down the hall, needing no ceremony to be remembered. After the alarms faded, what stayed with me was not the noise or the salute. It was the steady presence Brigadier General Evelyn Hart carried into that room and the way procedure held when nerves ran. She made calm feel like a tool you could learn and use under pressure. The floor returned to work because she trusted clear thinking, and that trust pulled the system to steady. I keep seeing that lesson in smaller places. A teacher lowers a room with a patient breath. A shift lead checks the basics before voices rise. A parent flips the right switch in the dark, and the house hums again. And quiet leadership shows up whenever someone chooses process over panic and works until the edges smooth out. If this reminded you of a moment when a calm person changed the tone, share it below and type "respect in silence." If a quiet leader ever helped you see a better way, your story might help someone steady their next hard day. Real leadership is often silent, consistent, and human. And you can carry that standard forward without making a speech. Leave with a full, steady breath and keep that calm close today.